BYD, is reportedly planning to expand Uber subsidies across Western countries, including Australia and New Zealand. But what happens if we want to stop Chinese vehicles from flooding the market? Well, China recently announced tariffs on Chinese EV imports, and they immediately responded, China that is, by launching an investigation into Canada's canola imports.
Been there.
And if it weren't for all of these subsidies, it's clear no one would be buying them, because Volvo announced during the week that they're canning plans to go completely electric by 2030. So clearly what they've got to do here, Lucy, is find any way possible to get these vehicles out there. And much like we've seen before with solar panels, you get cheap Chinese crap that is manufactured and essentially dumped upon Western countries like Australia for dirt cheap because they just need to get it out of the Chinese market. And then in the end, we're stuck with all this terrible, bad for the environment. We've got to do something about it, but we've got millions and millions of the things.
Yeah. Well, we're in a unique position in Australia because we don't actually manufacture the vehicles now. So if we were to introduce a tariff like what the USA and the EU have, it kind of wouldn't really make sense. But then you look at the other manufacturing parts that you also need to consider in all of this, like the batteries, the maintenance, the labour and all of that, that Australia will be looking to have a stranglehold on, right? But here's that word stranglehold that I'm using, where China have that, the CCP. What would it be if they weren't coming in and threatening some kind of trade war or an issue if we weren't subscribing to whatever it was that they were selling? So it's a really interesting situation, and we know that the Albanese government is always curtailing to China and that will not be in a real position to kind of have a position on this, really. So I find it quite fascinating, and where this is all.
I just want to know, the irony is, would you get rid of your Ford Falcon?
Oh my God,
is it 08?
The Falcon is doing much. There's another problem with the Falcon.
No more German cockroaches.
Apart from the no more German cockroaches, that has been done. Went to the electric sky. Alan, thank you very much. But yeah, no, I scraped it in the Aldi car park. We all knew about that, and I'm sure that's been keeping you up at night. Now there's something wrong with the engine. Like it's I don't know. There's something just. It's killing me. And
so you're going to get a BYD?
I'll take anything. I would take a push bike at this point over the Falcon.
But do you want a BYD? Do you want a BYD?
Well, the irony here, of course, is that the argument for Australia introducing electric vehicle targets and emissions limits for other cars is that Australia was becoming a dumping ground for all the old gas-guzzling clunkers from Europe and the USA and other markets because they had tougher regulations than we do. So they were coming here. And now it appears that we're becoming a dumping ground for electric vehicles that they can't get rid of in other jurisdictions.
Why don't we manufacture our own cars over here? Like, that's a genuine question.
But we did do it until...
It was so expensive.
It was prohibitively expensive and it requires...
This will fail because the issue with electric vehicles is not the price. I know they're expensive, but that's not the price.
People don't want it.
The reason why Volvo and Toyota and VW are cutting down on their production of electric vehicles is people have worked out that they're hopeless.
Yeah.
The problem is refuelling. You get a petrol car, you refuel in 3 minutes. The minimum it takes to refuel an electric vehicle is half an hour. You give up, and you have to do it every day. Not once a week, but every day.
And that's...
So everyone's worked that out. No one wants them anymore.
And that's why people are going to hybrids, right? There is an answer in front of us. If only we could just go where the market tells us to go. Strange idea.
I haven't seen this much controversy around someone going electric since Bob Dylan at the Newport Folk Festival.
But first, so many polls tonight and detail you haven't heard anywhere else. Our old mate Grim Jim, the great passenger of the Australian economy. You see, there is a difference between a windsock and the pilot of a plane. Which one would you actually give the trust over to? Probably not the windsock, but that, of course, is Grim Jim. He's the one saying, well, I feel your pain, a little bit up, a little bit down, but always, I deserve congratulations. Last week, the disgraceful display of trying to change the subject for their own failure as politicians and members and guardians of our own society when he was bashing away at the Reserve Bank. Now, this worked with Philip Lowe. It won't work a second time around. Even the former Treasurer and old Grim Jim's former boss, Wayne Swan, got in on it. And quite correctly, the Oz referred to that as a coward punch to the RBA head. The RBA has been in the sights of the government because if there is a 13th interest rate rise, supposedly that will be the tipping point. My belief is politically, if cost of living matters, the 12th, the 11th, the 10th, the 9th, the 8th have all put the Prime Minister and the Labor Party on very serious notice, if not right at the end of the plank. But this was the Labor Party trying to change the subject, most of the media following along.
The combination of global economic uncertainty and higher interest rates is smashing household budgets and slowing our economy considerably.
Treasurer's comments were absolutely nothing new.
The Reserve Bank is putting economic dogma over rational economic decision-making, hammering households, hammering mums and dads with higher rates, causing a collapse in spending and driving the economy backwards.
But God love Australia. God love the fellow normal people of this joint because, well, I don't know what's going to happen in an election. We needed to send a message. The message that we have been relentless about and at times feeling like a little bit of a lone soldier over the past 2 and a bit years. We knew about cost of living being major and we knew that inflation was out of control. We knew inflation was out of control in part because of the actions of this government. Well, the poll that dropped tonight has shown that the majority of Australians blame the government and its Treasurer, Grim Jim Chalmers, not the Reserve Bank. Have a look. This comes from the far right-wing annals of the Channel 9 newspapers. 51% of all voters say, in relation to the question of who do you think has greatest responsibility for keeping inflation down, the government, 51%. For Labor voters, the majority of them, 42%, say the government. For coalition voters, the majority, by a mile, 63% say the government. For other voters, everything from the touchy-teals all the way through to One Nation and UAP and anything else in between, 48%. Uncommitted, undecided voters, again, about 50% at 49%, and the seats that matter the most, 50%. You see, one of the ways that we have slowly but surely sort of got to where we've got about how I do this show each and every night for you is, yes, we have to talk about the stuff that is obviously large in the news. Yes, we have to point out some of the things that we think are examples of people pulling the wool over your eyes. And sometimes we're relentless on a particular topic because it feels like the topic that should be the total, absolute ram focus. Well, there's an entire industry of people who want to protect this government, protect its electoral chances, and want to change the subject. Now, obviously, the people in the government want to change the subject, but it's incredible how many people in the media are more than happy to try to change the subject because they don't experience the cost of living issues that you do. And even if they are feeling a little tougher than they did a little while ago, you couldn't possibly get rid of the greatest government of all time. I mean, after all, these were the people who almost 60% of Australians, according to a poll in The Guardian, sorry, a Redbridge poll, my apologies, said they couldn't name one thing this government has done to make their life better. Almost 60% of people. Now, let's slow down. Let's have a look at, again, more of these numbers because, again, all of this will be brushed away. There'll be some dramatic change of the subject that'll happen between now and when the sun comes up. I couldn't believe today, there's an ad attacking Peter Dutton. Who cares? Who cares? That's the Labor Party trying to change the subject. And just on that nuclear thing, $600 billion. This mob, according to the CSIRO, want to spend $1 trillion on changing the power system. So just don't fall for it. Let the lefties do it, not us, all right? We continue. When I say us, I mean this program. Now, interesting here, again, about the cost of living low, keeping cost of living low. You can tell I don't have my glasses. The Liberal Party leads the Labor Party by 7 points. Now, remember, what was the promise at the last election? Vote Labor, everything goes down. Well, now that's gone. It's now the Libs who most people believe in that situation. However, there's a significant number of undecided people. That's because they know that the Labor Party so-called solutions aren't good enough, but the Liberal Party has not put enough solutions on the table. They need to start doing it to actually convert people from sort of, I'm not all that into it, to actually fully making the change and being willing to change the government. Now, again, all the evidence says this is not a one-term government. But it could be. It could be if some of these other numbers are true. When it comes to overall economic management, you can see 37 to 26, 11-point lead for the Liberals right now. Managing the finances of the government, again, an 11-point lead of the Liberal Party over the Labor Party. things had been cracking for a while. They had been crumbling for the past little while, and I'm pleased to say people are now willing to tell a pollster, and that pollster presumably will tell a politician.
A Resolve poll has found more than half of voters are not buying the spin when it comes to whose fault high inflation is, regarding it as the government's. The same poll found 27% blame the RBA. Joining us live now for the answer, Peter Switzer, founder of the Switzer Report. Pete, good morning to you. Another busy week ahead. So on this point, who is right?
Pete, to be fair, the fact that the Reserve Bank raised interest rates 13 times, that contributed to inflation. It always does in trying to kill the demand of the economy by raising interest rates. It puts cost push forces into the economy. So the fact that inflation got to 8%, that was the RBA's part fault. There were a lot of other causes then. But since then, they've been bringing inflation down. It's now at 3.5%. And it would be lower if the government hadn't given tax cuts and had stimulated the economy to the extent it has. So I think if you put the argument into a fair consideration, the government is now more responsible for keeping inflation where it is today, making it difficult for the RBA to cut rates. However, the RBA has a responsibility to guess it right. And that's what it is. You've got to guess it right when it comes to the economy and the timing of when you introduce cuts. At the moment, we think the RBA is waiting probably till they actually see unemployment rise faster. But we've seen in the USA, they're a little bit surprised that maybe the economy is slowing down faster than they're expecting. So it's a 50-50 thing, but I think the fact that inflation is still over 3% is more down to the government than the RBA.
OK, now I find this story quite fascinating this morning, Pete. Divestiture seems to be a buzzword again today. Now the coalition is eyeing off a Qantas Jetstar breakup. That's in order to lower the cost of air tickets. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that there's a good argument that in industries where you've only got 2 or 3 competitors, that government regulation or government interference is not all that bad. It may well be a case of naming and shaming. And the ACCC used to be a lot more forceful under Dr. Alan Fels many years ago. And I think the ACCC has gone very silent on that kind of thing. So I think the idea of threatening divestiture, naming and shaming is probably the better policy. But I do argue that it's not just the government and the RBA creating inflation in this country. It's energy companies, it's airlines, it's supermarkets, it's unions. There's a whole group of people who've contributed to the inflation rate we've got today. And I think government needs to roll up the sleeves and become a little more forceful when it comes to these interest groups who've got the power to raise prices.
All righty.
Now, look, Treasurer Jim Chalmers spent last week bashing the Reserve Bank, accusing the central bank of smashing the economy in an outburst many saw as an attempt to pressure the board into lowering interest rates.
Chalmers' attack on the RBA was backed up by his former boss, Wayne Swan, who had this rather unflattering assessment.
The Reserve Bank is putting economic dogma over rational economic decision-making, hammering households, hammering mums and dads with higher rates, causing a collapse in spending and driving the economy backwards, doesn't necessarily deal with the principal pushes when it comes to higher inflation. The government is doing a lot to bring down inflation, but the Reserve Bank is simply punching itself in the face. It's counterproductive. And it's not good economic policy, and I'm incredibly disappointed with what they're doing.
But Chalmers was all let's kiss and make up today, telling the ABC that he and Reserve Bank Governor Michelle Bullock were working together.
My focus is on working with Governor Bullock. I've got a lot of respect for Governor Bullock. Our objectives are actually aligned to get on top of this inflation challenge, and we need to do that without ignoring the risks to growth.
It's an interesting strategy by Chalmers, and he's walked away from Wayne Swan's comments and said, no, Wayne Swan is not representing me. But I think they made their point, and the point was not being made to Michelle Bullock or the RBA. They're trying to sell a narrative to the voters, and we'll look at some polling a little later. It's not working, but they're trying to sell a narrative that it's not our fault, it's the RBA, that's why your interest rates are high. And this is typical of this government. They came to office promising they would take accountability and they would be responsible, but But you tell me one thing, one mistake, one error that this government has taken responsibility or accountability for, whether it's the immigration fiascos, the other mistakes we've seen, that they always point the finger. It's a public servant, it's the RBA, it's somebody else. And so now Jim Chalmers just kind of sliding back up, because he did get a fair bit of slack saying he was bullying a female Reserve Bank governor. But they've made the point to the public, and I think that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to sell that message. It's not our fault, it's the RBA's. We're doing what we can. But I don't know that Australians are buying that.
Well, you know you're in trouble when you've got to roll out Wayne Swan, don't you, to try and
the world's greatest treasurer.
The world's greatest treasurer, whatever happened to his surplus over his 6 years. But it's a very ominous warning that the RBA gave last week. They said sell up. If you're a homeowner, you might be facing the possibility of having to sell your own home. What does that mean, James? That things are not getting better. In fact, they're getting tougher out there. The cost of living crisis has not gone away, and you've got Jim Chalmers and Labor blaming the RBA for it. Well, let's talk about what Labor's done here to actually put on these inflationary pressures. Number one, big Australia got even bigger in the last 12 months.
Record immigration
records, more than 1 million migrants came to this country. Yep. That is a record. It is untenable and it is just ridiculous, particularly given it's putting pressure on inflation and the housing crisis. But the other issue is record spending. It is record government spending, and not just by federal Labor. We saw it among the states when they published their budgets. They went big. They spent up big. It is, of course, going to have a huge inflationary impact, as it has. So I think this was a cop-out.
And on the spending, Michelle Bullock said this is going to add to inflation. Jim Chalmers denied that, of course. But don't forget, cost of living, the government only started speaking about this 12 months into their term. Remember, for a year, all they talked about was the voice. Meanwhile, the economy was going downhill, and they only started to talk about cost of living when it became apparent that this was going to be a major election issue, and it now is, because two national polls published today both show bad news for Labor when it comes to, surprise, economic management.
Yes, an exclusive poll published in today's Sunday Telegraph has the government's primary vote at just 29%. That's a 4% drop in support for Labor over the past 3 months.
Now, this poll of 10,000 people found economic issues dominated people's concerns, with cost of living, housing and the economy generally the top 3 things people were worried about.
And in a Resolve poll released just hours ago by 9 newspapers, 51% of voters are blaming Labor rather than the Reserve Bank for high interest rates. So there you go. What does that tell you? That Jim Chalmers has lost all credibility in this narrative. He's blaming the RBA, but of course Australians are smarter than that. They know that actually it is Labor's fault. It is Labor's problem.
Can I just tell you one thing on that quickly? It's 27% of Aussies say it's the RBA's fault.
Yeah.
But 33% of Labor voters, so even Labor voters are only slightly more inclined to blame the RBA. Most people, including rusted-on Labor voters, know, no, the government is responsible for high interest rates.
Well, it's clear from both of those polls that Labor has well and truly abandoned its base. It's abandoned the blue-collar workers, the middle class, the middle Australian workers.
Well, their energy policy has done that.
Well, I mean, the energy policies has done that. It's no surprise that there's backlash, because if you look at Labor's CV, James, you've got population growth, which is masking a per capita recession, record spending, the power bills, whatever happened to the alleged $275 that we were all meant to get, record petrol prices, rents are up, building approvals are at 12-year lows. Everything is starting to add up.
I love the way you said the alleged 275.
Well, it is alleged.
As if
it's alleged.
The Prime Minister might sue if someone quotes him on that.
Well, it's an allegation. He's put up this allegation.
It is now.
And just one thing with both of those polls, which I found interesting, it said that voter intention results reveal a strong possibility of a minority government. Now, you and I have spoken to this at length. A minority government is a disaster. You will have the Prime Minister, followed by the de facto Prime Minister, Adam Bant, couple of Teals, perhaps a couple of Muslim votes, independents thrown in there. It would be an absolute omni-shambles. Now, the polling suggests that both parties, the polling's certainly not good for Labor.
No.
The polling is certainly pegging the coalition back a bit, but I do not rule out Peter Dutton at all, because the policies the coalition are putting forward are bold.
And Peter Dutton is starting, and increasingly so, differentiating himself from Labor. And for too long, the Liberal Party, the Labor Party, what's the difference? But we're finally starting to see some significant differences in policy. It started with The Voice, now nuclear power. The Coalition have promised to overturn that ridiculous decision to shut down the proposed gold mine in Orange. So you're right, we may well see a contest as we get closer to the election, but God help us if we get a minority government with an effective Deputy Prime Minister, Adam Bandt.
Oh, it's a disaster waiting to happen.
Let's look at the market. It is just open. It was expected to drop sharply. It's only a couple of minutes in, but how's it looking?
Look, let's get up the live ASX 200 chart. Basically, over the weekend, US markets fell more than 1%. OK, so the Aussie market's only down 0.5%, so losses aren't as bad as in the US. But what happened in America over the weekend was there are more people basically on unemployment benefits than there were previously. So it's basically a sign that the economy in the US is slowing down. They're still creating jobs, but they're not creating as many jobs as they were previously. So there's fears in the US of a potential recession from rates being too high. People in America, investors seem to think the US Federal Reserve needs to cut rates aggressively. And we are in September. They've got a rates meeting coming up very soon in the next couple of weeks. So that's what's caused US markets to fall. And it's pulled our market down a bit this morning. We're only down by 0.5%. Remember, we're still pretty close to record highs. So the Aussie ASX 200 is still in pretty good shape and it's holding up reasonably well. But we've started the week on a Monday in the red.
OK, not too bad, Ed. Thanks so much.
But first, just when you thought you'd been able to escape politics for a few minutes and enjoy the AFL football finals, there's Anthony Albanese popping up in the winners' rooms after the game.
Yes, as Hawthorn players celebrated a famous victory, the PM, donning a Hawthorn scarf, put himself front and centre as if he had kicked the winning goal in the Hawks' elimination final win.
And the Prime Minister, Mr Albanese, that was fun. 97,500 in the house here tonight.
An awesome crowd, great atmosphere and great match.
And it was a sensation. These guys are irresistible at the moment, are they not?
Well, they're just young guys having a crack and playing incredible football. 2 goals down quarter time, but they hung in there and were just awesome.
Amazing the excitement that something like this can generate for the people. You can see the people in the rooms here now.
Oh, it's great. You could feel the atmosphere right around the ground too, around the G. It was an awesome night.
Enjoy.
Good on you.
Thank
It was incredible atmosphere in the rooms right until Anthony Albanese showed up. The PM's desperation to come across as the everyday man has angered football commentators.
Here we go with our inserter alerts, and Nathan, these are people that try to insert themselves into finals football when maybe they just stay in their lane.
For the good of themselves, is that what we're saying? Well, because I feel like the Prime Minister, this was for the good of himself, going into the Hawthorn rooms, and this sickens me. Anthony Albanese, he's had a look at the polls, and he's thought Damo's man, Peter Dutton, is closing and he's in front, there's a gap, he feels like, I need to look like a common man, I'm going to go into the Hawthorn rooms, give it up, Albo, no one's buying it.
Yeah, they are not wrong. And the other bizarre thing is we saw Albo, of course, in his Hawthorn scarf on Friday night, but he can, when it helps his cause, of course, also be seen in a Geelong scarf, James, a Collingwood scarf, but even a Sydney scarf, apparently.
Well, speaking of Sydney, here is the Prime Minister playing full forward, not for Hawthorn, but for the Sydney Swans.
It's just all so cringe, isn't it? But look, just before we chat about this, I've also got to show you this clip of Albo trying to play cricket. I mean, his grip, James, on the ball is about as bad as his grip on the economy. Mate, get back to to your day job. Leave sport alone. It's not working for you. Go away. Look, James, maybe he thinks that, you know, if he's only a one-term Prime Minister, that he can get a gig as a full forward for the Hawks football club.
Not the way he catches a ball. As
clearly. No, look, desperate for likes, desperate to show that he is the everyday man. Look at me. I like my footy. I like my beer. I like my pie. I like my sausage roll. How many of those Hawthorn players who've slogged it out, played a tough match, had a tough fought match, actually want the Prime Minister lingering around them like a bad smell? It's embarrassing, it's cringe, and I agree with the commentators. They have seen that he's seen the polling's bad, and he goes, put the camera on me. Where is it? Please give me a camera. Find it somewhere. Put it on me. Make the papers. Well, Albo, it's making the papers for the wrong reasons.
Do you know the Hawthorn theme song?
Yeah.
It starts off with the line, "We're a happy team at Hawthorn."
Yeah.
I don't think they were that happy to see Elbo in the rooms. But, you know, Elbo's got not much working for him at the moment. So perhaps he feels like if I can just hang around some winners, maybe some of that gold dust might rub off. And for the sake of the country, I hope some of Hawthorn's gold dust rubs off on him, because nothing much is working at the moment. But to be fair, he's not the first Prime Minister who's taken a shine to sport. And watching him drop that ball in the cricket was pretty great. But it did remind me of John Howard, who was a genuine sports lover and famously played cricket and did a terrible delivery, made an absolute fool of himself. But that's what Prime Ministers do. He's at the football. It'd be nice to just enjoy the footy without having to see Anthony Albanese.
Without him inserting himself. Go back to Parliament, stick to Parliament House, I say.